Good morning, I'm Dilek Tuna. Welcome to Daybreak live on A News. Let's begin with the top stories for the morning. US President Donald Trump says American forces hit targets in Iran with possible plans to target Karg Island. Israel expands its military buffer zone in southern Lebanon to prevent Hezbollah rocket attacks. And US President Donald Trump signalled a reversal on Cuba sanctions, allowing a Russian tanker to deliver much-needed crude to the island. And our first story this morning, US President Donald Trump says American forces have struck multiple targets inside Iran, calling it a major military operation. His comments come as Washington weighs further escalation, including the possibility of targeting Karg Island, a critical facility for Iran's economy and global energy supplies.
US President Donald Trump says American forces have struck multiple targets inside Iran, describing it as a major military operation. He said many long sought-after targets had been destroyed, but did not provide details.
So we've had very good negotiations today with Iran, getting a lot of the things that they should have given us a long time ago. We'll see how it works out, but they're very good, moving along very nicely. They've destroyed a lot of additional targets today. The Navy's gone, the Air Force is gone, we know that. But we destroyed many targets today. It was a big day. And we are negotiating with them directly and indirectly.
Trump's comments point to a dual approach, continuing negotiations with Iran, while at the same time expanding military pressure. He also said Iran is allowing oil shipments through the Strait of Hormuz, with around 20 tankers expected to pass as what he described as a gesture during talks. On the ground, the situation is intensifying. Explosions have been reported across Tehran, with air defense systems activated. Targets reportedly include Tehran's Mehrabad airport, a petrochemical facility in Tabriz, and other sites, including residential areas. Iran has responded with drone and missile attacks targeting Israel and areas hosting US forces across the region. The conflict is now spreading beyond a single front. Iranian military officials say they are ready to respond decisively if threats turn into direct action. US media reports say the Pentagon is preparing for possible ground operations involving special forces and conventional troops. Trump has also told the Financial Times that the US could attempt to seize Karg Island, a key oil export hub off Iran's coast. The island is considered a critical part of Iran's economy, and analysts say taking control of it could significantly reduce Tehran's oil revenues and impact its ability to sustain military operations. Thousands of US troops are already in the region, including around 5,000 Marines. Reports suggest up to 10,000 more could be deployed, expanding Washington's military options.
Now, staying on this topic, US President Donald Trump is facing key decisions on Iran. Let's go over live to Ubay Shabanda to listen to the rest of that story.
New reports in Washington have emerged that President Trump is considering whether to authorize a ground operation by the US military inside Iran. The objective, securing nearly 500 kilograms of highly enriched uranium that Iranian scientists could use in the future to build a nuclear weapon. The mission would be immensely complex and risky, and would likely require US forces to be on the ground for days deep inside Iran. The uranium is buried deep underground, so any forces that are deployed by the US would have to establish a secure perimeter while engineers excavate, all while likely facing fire from drones and Iranian paramilitary units. And then once the uranium is secured, extracting it out of Iran poses challenges all on its own. Such an operation could take as long as a week to successfully complete. It is not clear just how close President Trump is to authorizing such a daring raid at the moment. Thousands of more US troops are being deployed into the Middle East as speculations grow that a ground operation may be imminent. On Saturday, the US Central Command said about 3,500 additional soldiers arrived in the Middle East on board the USS Tripoli. The sailors and Marines are with the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit and arrived in the region along with transport and strike fighter aircraft, as well as an amphibious assault and tactical assets. That's according to Central Command. And on Sunday, President Trump said that Iranian Speaker of Parliament Mohammad Ghalibaf agreed to allow a total of 20 oil tankers to pass through the Strait of Hormuz under U.S. escort as a sign of goodwill by the new Iranian leadership as talks between the U.S. and Iran continue. In an interview with the Financial Times, Trump praised Iran's new leaders as, quote, a totally different group of people, very professional. I'm Ubishi Bander, A News, Washington.
And now let's have a look at the front pages of some of the major news outlets. First up, we've got CNN. Trump raises prospect of taking Iran's oil and again weighs seizing Karg Island. So Karg Island has been on the table for some time now, and analysts have discussed it at length. Trump told the Financial Times that the US could attempt to seize Karg Island, a small island off the coast of Iran. And there's been speculation for some time about whether US forces would at some point attempt to take over the island as part of a ground invasion. It's extremely significant because the island is home to a major oil terminal, and 90% of Iran's crude oil comes through a terminal on the island, transported through pipes from the mainland. And seizing it would not only choke off Iran's oil exports, but could also provide a platform from which to carry out attacks against the mainland. Now, in response to these talks by Trump, not only this recent announcement to Financial Times, but earlier, Iran's Parliament Speaker Mohammad Baghdad Ghalibaf warned that an invasion would be answered with relentless, uneasing attacks on all the vital infrastructure of the regional country that assisted the US operation. Iran also reinforced its defenses on Karg Island in recent weeks in response to the threat, including deploying additional military personnel and air defenses. Tehran has sent additional shoulder-fired surface-to-air missiles to the island and has laid traps, including anti-personnel and anti-armor mines in the waters surrounding it. So it's certainly a very dangerous escalation there in the case that the United States actually does decide to go ahead with this. We'll certainly continue to bring you key updates on that story. Now, let's move on to our second front page. And we've got BBC. A partial government shutdown becomes the longest in US history. So, according to this report, the shutdown began after lawmakers failed to agree on funding legislation, leading to the standoff between the White House and Congress over budget priorities. And the central issue in the dispute has been disagreement over government spending, with both sides maintaining firm positions and showing little willingness to compromise. So as the shutdown continues, hundreds of thousands of federal employees were affected. Some workers were placed on unpaid leave, while others were required to continue working without pay until funding legislation could be passed. And this has had a direct impact on public services, government agencies, and everyday administrative functions. So government shutdowns do occur when Congress fails to pass funding bills required to keep federal agencies operating. While shutdowns have happened before, the length of this one made it particularly notable, reflecting the intensity of political polarization in the United States. So now we'll move on to our third and final front page, news from Australia. So Deutsche Welle reported Australia police kills a man suspected of killing 2 officers. So there was a 7-month manhunt involving hundreds of officers on the case, and Australian police have finally caught up with Desmond Freeman, one of the country's most wanted criminals. Authorities say the man was located after several months on the run, leading to a confrontation with police. Officials confirmed that the suspect was shot during the operation, bringing an end to a case that has drawn significant public attention across the country. The original incident, in which 2 officers were killed and another injured, had shocked communities and prompted a large-scale law enforcement response involving multiple agencies. So that was our last front page. And now that's your press roundup for this morning. After the break, we'll take a deeper look into global stories. So stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak. Now let's have a look at the global stories. Israel is intensifying its campaign near the Lebanese border, expanding its military presence in the south as cross-border fighting with Hezbollah continues. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the aim is to reshape the security situation in the north.
The situation along Israel's northern frontier remains volatile, with continued exchanges of fire raising concerns of a wider escalation. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he has ordered an expansion of Israel's military buffer zone inside southern Lebanon as fighting along the northern border intensifies. Speaking from Israel's Northern Command on Sunday, Netanyahu said the move is aimed at pushing Hezbollah forces further from the border and preventing attacks on Israeli territory.
In Lebanon, I have just instructed to further expand the existing security zone in order to decisively thwart the threat of invasion and to push anti-tank missile fire away from our border. It must be understood that Nasrallah built up a large force here. He believed that with this force, he would destroy us. Well, we eliminated Nasrallah. We eliminated thousands of Hezbollah militants. And above all, we eliminated the enormous threat of 150,000 missiles and rockets that were intended to devastate Israel's cities. But Hezbollah still retains a residual capability to launch rockets at us. And what I discussed today with the commanders here are ways to remove that threat as well.
Israeli troops were seen positioned along the Lebanese border on Sunday as operations continue in the area. The expansion of the so-called security zone marks a further escalation in Israel's ground operations in southern Lebanon, which began earlier this month. The developments come amid rising regional tensions linked to the broader Israel-Iran confrontation, with Hezbollah operating as one of Tehran's key allies.
Houthi forces in Yemen say they've carried out a second attack on Israel in less than 24 hours using missiles and drones. The group's spokesperson, Yahya Saree, said the strikes are part of a broader campaign linked to the regional allies. The escalation raises concerns over wider instability, as the Houthis have previously targeted shipping routes in the Red Sea and beyond. The group has also signalled more attacks could follow in the coming days.
The Yemeni armed forces affirm that, in fulfilling their religious, moral, and humanitarian duties towards the free people of the nation on the fronts of jihad and resistance, and in response to the enemy's crimes against the people and the countries of the nation, they will continue, with Allah's help and reliance upon Allah, to carry out their military operations in the coming days until the criminal enemy ceases its attacks and aggression.
Israel's Prime Minister says the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem will now have full and immediate access to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre after police prevented him from leading Palm Sunday Mass. Benjamin Netanyahu said Cardinal Pier Battista Pizzaballa had been asked not to enter the church over safety concerns, citing missile threats linked to the conflict with Iran near Jerusalem's holy sites. The incident drew criticism from Western nations and church officials, some calling it an overreach and a violation of religious access. Police later said limited worship would be allowed at the site while broader security restrictions remain in place. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is visiting Jordan for talks focused on security cooperation as Kyiv strengthens defense ties across the Middle East. Zelensky said discussions with King Abdullah will center on regional security and coordination with partners, particularly in countering drone threats. Ukraine has already deployed experts to advise several countries in the region on intercepting Iranian-made drones, which have increasingly been used in recent attacks. The visit comes amid heightened tensions following the escalation between Israel, the US and Iran, which has triggered missile and drone strikes. The trip follows recent visits to Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates and Qatar, as Kyiv looks to deepen defence cooperation beyond Europe. President Volodymyr Zelensky's visits to the UAE and Qatar highlight Ukraine's push to broaden its diplomatic and military partnerships beyond traditional Western allies such as the US and the EU countries. So now let's welcome our guest. John Kovalich joins us from Russia to discuss that further. John, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So by engaging in Gulf states, Kyiv seeks strategic support from nations with ties to multiple global powers, potentially gaining both political leverage and access to advanced military technology. Now, sorry, let me just go down to my first question. President Zelensky's visit to the Gulf highlights Ukraine's efforts to broaden international partnerships. How significant is it that Kyiv is strengthening defence ties beyond its traditional Western allies?
Optically, an important journey for President Zelensky. And it's the challenge for him is what he needs is military equipment. So the United States is supplying its Gulf allies with the military hardware that Ukraine would like to have. And so part of the transaction that President Zelensky is trying to create is, okay, Gulf nations, you're under attack with drones and rockets and missiles from Iran. We know how, particularly with drones, we know how to use these interceptors. We've done it cost effectively, and we have technology to share with you and also the product itself. The challenge comes then President want for that? Well, he wants cash so he can buy more products and support his government. But he really wants the products that the U.S. has given to the Gulf. So basically, it's a trade. You give me your Patriot, you give me your THAAD, I'll give you drones. But then you get into the reality of this, which is all of this takes time. And the agreements that have thus far been announced are agreements, are about discussions, because Ukraine needs every drone it has to shoot down incoming Russian missiles and rockets and drones. So it's a challenge, but optically, it's going to have a tipping point. But it is important that he is seen with people who traditionally are not his friends, because these are energy producing nations, and their goal is to have energy costs high so it helps them. Ukraine's an importer. He'd rather have energy prices low. And Russia, of course, is an exporter, which benefits from high export prices.
And the agreements, as you said, focus on air defense systems, which Ukraine has repeatedly identified as a top priority. How critical are these systems at this stage of the war?
They're more and more critical because Russia has a production capacity that exceeds Ukraine's production capacity. And then Russia has augmented that production capacity with product that has been, one, imported from Iran, but then the technology in essence being licensed. So Russia is then producing these products, and Russia is unleashing daily hundreds and hundreds of drones and rockets and missiles into Ukrainian territory. And it's overwhelming the ability of the Ukrainian defenses, including what they're manufacturing, as well as what they're getting from NATO allies, EU allies, the US, in terms of selling to the EU and NATO for Ukraine. So it's a challenge. Even though Ukraine is shooting down sometimes 90% of this stuff, it's the 10% that'll kill a family. So they really don't have an ability to be anything other than 100%. And that's just incredibly hard to do when Russia is unleashing so many attacks at so many places and doing it simultaneously.
And what does this Gulf tour, John, suggest about Ukraine's diplomatic strategy as the conflict continues?
it's been really interesting to watch how Ukraine has continued to expand its traditional relationship base. When there were issues relating to South Africa, when the president of South Africa went to Russia, you then had Ukraine sort of pivot to Africa. They then pivot to the BRICS countries, and they have gone outside their comfort zone, and they've also gone to countries that traditionally are more friendly to the Russian Federation than would be friendly to Ukraine or the EU or NATO or the US. So they have made some really smart tactical moves. The challenge, though, is moving the optics, which we're watching now on your B-roll, that the optics look great. The president of Ukraine on his plane lands in these capitals, sees the heads of state, the heads of government, the monarchs, and they sign nice documents and everyone says great things. But he can't load up that plane with Patriot missiles to take home. And that's what he really wants. And then from these other countries where they're trying to expand their diplomatic relations, they're doing so in Ukraine produces a lot of agricultural products. Put pressure on the Russians to let us sell you those products, give you those products. And they made a lot of donations. So they're doing all the right stuff, but they still have a reality check. And that is Russia's bigger, Russia's stronger, Russia has China, and they just have a military that's willing to do a lot more damage to Ukraine than is willing or can do to Russia.
Okay, John, the connection is breaking up slightly, but we seem okay for the minute. So I'll try and get one more question in. Countries like the UAE and Qatar often maintain relations with multiple global powers. How important is their positioning in a conflict like this one?
It's very, and I hope that we're together. It's very important for the Gulf states to continue to maintain their relationships and to expand those relationships, because generally they're not perceived as the good folks, because they're energy producers. They want energy prices to be high, and importers want energy prices to be low. And so, it's challenging for them to get sympathy from people. We look at them and go, "You're rich, you're small, your per capita's high, you spend a lot of money and football teams and racehorses, and you really don't care about anybody else. You're selfish." And so this is an opportunity for them to basically say, no, we're so cuddly, we want to be helpful to everybody, we understand your issue. But in the end, when the Israel-US-Iran war ends, countries have had a lot of damage. They're going to want energy to be high so they can recoup the losses. Importers want them low. And we're going to cycle back to the traditional, I think, relationship, which is not everyone likes energy producers, just like not many people like oil companies.
Okay, John, thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's always a pleasure. Thanks for your analysis.
Thank you.
And now in other news, Britain is considering deploying a Royal Navy vessel to the Strait of Hormuz as concerns grow over maritime security and the disruption of one of the world's most critical oil routes. For more, here's our correspondent Zainab Farajzadeh.
Britain is preparing to deploy a Royal Navy evacuation vessel to the Strait of Hormuz, equipped with autonomous drones designed to detect and clear sea mines, according to the Sunday Times. RFA Lime Bay, an amphibious landing ship with capacity for up to around 500 troops and onboard medical and defensive systems, is currently undergoing maintenance in Gibraltar and had been scheduled for training exercises in the Mediterranean. However, contingency plans authorized by Defense Secretary John Healey could see the vessel redirected to the Gulf as part of efforts to secure one of the world's most critical shipping crews. The ship, is expected to be fitted with advanced mine clearing technology, including underwater drones and remotely operated systems, allowing it to act as a mothership for seabed scanning and disposal operations. A defense source said no final decision has been taken, describing the move as a preventative step to give ministers options if action is required to restore the flow of commercial shipping. Royal Navy mine hunting drones already in the region are also being considered for deployment as part of discussions around a wider multinational effort to reopen the strait. The development comes amid a growing international pressure to act. Meanwhile, the United States has increased its military presence in the region with an amphibious assault ship carrying thousands of personnel arriving in recent days. The escalation follows weeks of conflict involving the US, Israel, and Iran, with continued missile and drone attacks reported across the region. The Strait of Hormuz has been severely disrupted since early March, contributing to a sharp rise in global oil prices and leaving vessels stranded. Around 20 million barrels of oil normally pass through the route each day, making it one of the most strategically important energy corridors in the world. Any deployment of British assets is likely to depend on how the security situation develops. Zena Ferrisate, A News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
US President Donald Trump says he has no objection to countries sending oil to Cuba, signalling a shift in US policy after months of restricting shipments to the island. His comments come as a Russian tanker carrying crude oil is nearing Cuba, expected to deliver a major shipment. Until now, Washington had effectively blocked oil flows to the island in an effort to pressure the government in Havana.
If a country wants to send some oil into Cuba right now, I have no problem with it. Doesn't help him. If he loses one boatload of oil, that's all it is. It's fine. If he wants to do that, and if other countries want to do it, it doesn't bother me much. It's not going to have an impact. Cuba's finished. They have a bad regime. They have very bad and corrupt leadership. And whether or not they get a boat of oil, it's not going to matter. I'd prefer letting it in, whether it's Russia or anybody else, because the people need heat and cooling and all of the other things that you need.
Cuba is facing a severe fuel shortage with supplies running critically low across the island. The crisis is closely tied to renewed tensions with the United States and decades of strained relations.
Cuba is running out of fuel, and to understand why, we need to look at its long and difficult relationship with the United States. The tensions began in 1959, when Fidel Castro took power and moved the country closer to the Soviet Union. In response, Washington imposed sanctions and cut diplomatic ties, isolating Cuba from global markets. The conflict deepened with the Bay of Pigs invasion and the Cuban Missile Crisis, cementing decades of hostility. For years, Cuba depended on the Soviet Union for cheap oil and financial support. But after its collapse in 1991, the island was left struggling. It later turned to Venezuela, relying on oil shipments to keep its economy running. That supply has now been cut. The United States has increased pressure, blocking Venezuelan oil and warning other countries not to step in. As a result, Cuba is facing one of its worst fuel shortages in years, affecting transport, electricity, and daily life. There was a brief thaw in relations in 2014 when Barack Obama restored diplomatic ties. But analysts say the opening did not lead to real economic reform. Instead, much of the economy remained tightly controlled by the state and military, limiting broader change. In 2017, Donald Trump reversed many of Obama's policies and tightened sanctions again. Then, in 2021, his administration placed Cuba back on its list of state sponsors of terrorism, a move strongly condemned by Havana. Today, Cuba faces a combination of long-standing restrictions, reduced foreign support, and growing economic pressure.
NASA says it's ready to launch its first crewed mission toward the moon in over 50 years, with astronauts now in final preparations in Florida. The Artemis 2 mission will carry 4 astronauts from the Kennedy Space Center on a roughly 10-day journey. They will travel aboard the Orion spacecraft, flying around the moon before returning to Earth, with no landing planned. The mission is designed to test key systems required for future human missions to the lunar surface. We'll take a quick break now, and when we return, we'll take a look at the regional headlines, where an analyst will be joining us to dig further into some of the key stories. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and thank you for joining us this morning on Daybreak. Let's take a look at the stories impacting the region. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Mohammad Ishaq Dar said on Sunday that Islamabad is preparing to host meaningful talks in the coming days aimed at ending the Iran conflict, following 2-day talks with regional foreign ministers.
Pakistan is stepping up diplomatic efforts to ease tensions in the Middle East, hosting key regional powers in Islamabad for high-level talks on the Iran conflict. Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan and Egyptian Foreign Minister Badr Abdelati met Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif as Pakistan hosted regional counterparts for de-escalation efforts. The meeting comes as the conflict linked to US and Israeli actions against Iran continues, with the Strait of Hormuz under strain. Energy supplies and disruptions have contributed to rising prices. Speaking after the consultations, Pakistan's Foreign Minister Mohammad Ishaq Dar said Islamabad is ready to host talks between Washington and Tehran.
Pakistan will be honored to host and facilitate meaningful talks between the two sides in coming days for a comprehensive and lasting settlement of the ongoing conflict.
Dar says both sides have shown confidence in Pakistan's role, with support from regional partners including Saudi Arabia and China. Earlier, Sharif also spoke with Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian as part of ongoing diplomatic outreach. Officials said proposals include steps to improve maritime security and restore shipping flows through key regional routes. In parallel, contacts at the security level are ongoing. Pakistan's army chief has been in communication with US Vice President J.D. Vance, according to a source familiar with the matter. However, diplomatic progress remains uncertain.
Pakistan is hosting senior ministers from Turkey, Saudi Arabia and Egypt in Islamabad for urgent talks, as we just saw in that story then, aimed at de-escalating the expanding conflict involving Iran. The meetings focus on maritime security, conflict reduction and possible negotiation pathways amid rising regional instability and disruptions to key shipping routes. I'm joined now by Kausar Nawab, chairman of the Belt and Road Initiative for Sustainable Development, to discuss the significance of these diplomatic efforts. Kausar, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
So how do the latest meetings in Islamabad reflect shifting regional priorities in response to the widening Iranian conflict?
I think this is a very good sign which showed by Pakistan, who hosted this brotherly Muslim countries foreign ministers in Islamabad recently. That was just not only a diplomatic role which Pakistan has played, but I think it was also a sign of Muslim unity once again showing to the world by initiative by Pakistan. And I think this was a sign of hope for the region, for the globe, because the conflict is not only affecting the regional peace, but it's also affecting the global economic situation as well. And I believe that personally, that was really a good steps towards the de-escalation between Iran, Israel, and United States.
And what role can Pakistan essentially play as a mediator between these competing regional and international interests?
I think Pakistan is very crucial at this point, and Pakistan is already playing a very good role. Is just mentioned in the report that the Chief of Army of Pakistan, Field Marshal, is also in a very close contact, and who is very including the Prime Minister of Pakistan, the Foreign Minister, who is the Deputy Prime Minister as well. They are in closely contact with the United States and, of course, with Iran as well, and of course, in the regional other stakeholders, including Saudi Arabia and other Gulf countries. And I believe that these efforts can bring a very good position to to to to position itself. I mean, Pakistan is a mediator between these countries because we do have a very good trust with all stakeholders, including Iran and Saudi Arabia, and of course with the United States as well. So I believe that Pakistan can host these mediation talk, and I think this can lead to solve the issue through dialogue and further discussions.
Okay, and so to what extent can cooperation between countries like Turkey, Saudi Arabia and Egypt contribute to de-escalation efforts? Because on the other hand, we're hearing a lot from Trump, especially in these past few days, that the escalation seems like it might actually go further with a possible ground invasion. So what's your analysis there?
This is actually very discouraging when we see such kind of statement from U.S. side, and then we in another side we see continuous attacks from Israel on Iran, and I think this is actually weakening the position of discussion and talks. But I think Pakistan has already showed in there's a huge trust which in Iran also placed on Pakistan as well by allowing the ships with the Pakistani flags in the Strait of Hormuz, which is indeed a very uh, proud moment for Pakistan as well. And of course, it positioned Pakistan more stronger to host these talks and to step into this talk as well. I should also mention that Pakistan is very vulnerable to this conflict itself as well. We are sharing a very long border with Iran, and this is also is a direct threat towards security as well, the conflict itself. And then we are also sharing a very strong bond with Saudi Arabia and other Gulf countries as well. Particularly with Saudi Arabia, we have this strategic defense pact, and also being an Islamic country, we hold a very special place for Saudi Arabia as well, and of course for Iran as well. So I think the Pakistan can make much more effective efforts to to stabilize this all peace. But when we say the attacks and then the cross statements by President Trump and similarly other responsible officers and political figures, this making it weaker. But sometimes these are political stunt, and seeing this, we see on another 5 to 10 minutes the definitely, and the statements from the same political leaders globally, they are also very volatile, and it's more like a weather in different cities. That's once you see a rain and another time you see just in few hours a sun. So it's something like that for me.
And Kesa, could ongoing diplomatic initiatives like this actually translate into direct negotiations between the key parties involved? Because Iran has also been very clear that they will remain resolute in their resistance, and they want security guarantees. So in other words, in lay terms, they want guarantees that this will not happen again. So Israel or the US, their key adversaries, will not attack Iran again. Is that likely? And what do security guarantees actually look like, in your opinion?
So personally, while seeing a very weak role of this multilateral forums, including the United Nations, especially where we see that in Russia-Ukraine conflict as well. And similarly, in the past, we have seen in Azerbaijan-Armenia conflict as well. We have not seen even in Kashmir conflict with India and Pakistan, and similarly in other as well. So we've never seen such kind of real potential in multilateral platforms and forums who can be effectively guarantee the deals between the states. It's more like a weaker and a stronger, to consider to be a weaker and a stronger, the deal between a weaker and a stronger. So I think personally, if Iran's statement is that cannot be practically assured by none of the states, including Pakistan or the even the European Union itself or the NATO itself, or even like China or Russia. But I believe, I mean, these talks can make a way in the middle way somewhere. So I mean, no one can stop the US, whatever seen just recently in the past, including Venezuelan attempt as well. So after that, things are very differently seen in the international diplomacy, particularly at multilateral platform. For me, I believe that these multilateral platforms are almost no valid. I mean, it is no point. But yes, if Pakistan engage China, European Union, and I believe even Russia as well, then things can be differently seen because they are a very global, big stakeholders.
Okay. Kasir Nawab, thank you so much for your time this morning. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much, and I hope, I personally wish that this situation come over, and I think things have settled down, and because it is affecting every single human being around the world in a one way or another way. Thank you.
Indeed, we share your thoughts. Thank you so much for that. Now let's continue with regional news. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has thanked Azerbaijan for its humanitarian assistance and support in facilitating aid deliveries from other countries. Araghchi said in a statement on X, "I express my gratitude to the government and people of Azerbaijan for their humanitarian aid, as well as for the conditions created for the delivery of aid from other countries." And Turkey is positioning itself at the centre of the global climate discussion as it prepares to host COP31. Among the flagship initiatives is a major marine cleanup operation in the Marmara region aimed at tackling pollution, protecting biodiversity and reversing years of ecological strain. Nuray Mustafa reports from Turkey.
The road to COP31 is taking shape, with Turkey set to become the focal point of the global climate agenda as host nation. Across the country, a number of major environmental projects are currently underway. One of the most prominent is İzmit Bay Bottom Mud Cleaning Project, which has drawn attention as one of the largest environmental initiatives in Europe. According to reports from the Kocaeli Metropolitan Municipality, sediment accumulated on the seabed is causing biological issues such as mucilage, posing serious risks to both the environment and public health. Experts say that cleaning these sediments will help preserve biodiversity in the region and restore the marine ecosystem. The project is being carried out with the support of scientific institutions including Istanbul University and TÜBİTAK Marmara Research Center. Preparations for the cleaning up begin in 2022 with planning, legal permits and tender process completed within a year. Practical work started in 2023. The project aims to remove 3.8 million cubic meters of seabed sediment from an area of 468 hectares, roughly equivalent to 650 football pitches.
With the climate change and the global warming, that also adds up and like a catalyzer effect on this whole process, and that's why recently we have more and more environmental disasters on the lakes, and like green and blue algae blooms and all sorts of, or mucilage outbreak happened in Marmara Sea in 2022. So these are all related and all connected to each other. So in order to stop this, we have to take action, and of course stopping these discharges to these water sources is one of the prioritized action that has to be taken. But also we need to clean the polluted sea waters as much as we can do.
Experts emphasize that the project is of strategic importance not only locally, but for the entire Marmara region. As a result, a cooperation protocol has been signed between the Kocaeli Metropolitan Municipality and the Turkish Ministry of Environment, Urbanization and Climate Change. Once completed, the project is expected to restore ecological balance in İzmit Bay and revitalize marine life. Nuray Mustafa, Avaz Hajiyev for A News, İzmit, Kocaeli, Türkiye.
As global tensions rise, the focus is shifting beyond politics to how societies communicate and stay connected. Many believe culture plays a key role in bridging divides and shaping understanding. At a summit in Istanbul, Bulgaria's Minister of Culture, Naden Todorov, shared his thoughts with A News.
Culture cannot solve problems. Culture can prevent problems. And how does this happen? This happens through education. Education is something that we are missing today. And I don't mean learning about history, mathematics, or language, or whatever. Education in terms of working together, communicating together, doing things together. In that matter, culture is extremely important because, let's say, arts, let's say music. I'm a musician. I spoke in my panel about music. What means music for people? It means that they don't just play instrument. I mean, okay, they can play, they cannot play. The main thing is they do it together. And the reason that culture is important in the education is that, let's say, in the schools, if children study together to sing together in a choir or play together in an orchestra, it means they learn responsibility. They learn to depend on other people. They learn to be friendly to each other. And this is communication too. And this is very important to be learned in the schools because later it's much more difficult. In the last decades, people don't study this anymore in the schools so much in most countries. And what can we see as a result? We can see that people got much more aggressive. And I don't only mean the conflicts north of Turkey or south of Turkey. I mean the conflicts in the countries. I mean the way people communicate with each other, they are aggressive. You can see it all over the world. Soft power is the way to learn how to communicate to each other so that we prevent all this that is happening today. The biggest way to influence today is the digital place. I mean, the social media. Facebook for older people like me, or Instagram for younger people, or TikTok for even younger people. So in other countries, there are different social medias that are important, like X, like Contact, or whatever. But social media can be a tool if we want to use it as such. But if we leave it just like that, without putting our messages and without listening to the messages of the other people, then it is just a place that people disagree with each other.
Across Turkey, a unique urban renewal project is turning ordinary neighbourhoods into vibrant works of art. In the southwestern city of Mersin, entire buildings have become canvases, bringing world-famous masterpieces to the streets. Let's take a look.
A municipal urban renewal initiative in the southwestern province of Mersin has transformed entire neighbourhoods into an open-air art gallery where the works of world-renowned painters are reproduced across the facades of residential buildings. Launched in 2017 by the Toroslar municipality, the project initially focused on aging, weather-worn buildings in the Akbelen and Güney-Kent districts, areas once marked by deteriorating urban landscapes. As part of the effort, painter Nasife Bilgin Hazar was commissioned to recreate iconic artworks on building exteriors, turning neglected facades into striking visual landmarks. Her large-scale reproductions draw inspiration from masters such as Vincent van Gogh, Pablo Picasso, Frida Kahlo, Salvador Dali, and Leonardo da Vinci, alongside prominent Turkish artists. The transformation has redefined the visual identity of entire neighbourhoods, with rows of buildings now covered in vivid colours and intricate compositions. Locals have come to call them the painted buildings, offering passers-by an immersive experience, more like walking through a curated exhibition than a residential area.
It has become like an open-air museum. Because the buildings stand side by side, walking through the area feels like touring a gallery. The project has received widespread attention. Even today, I still come across images of it on social media. It proved to be the right initiative.
Hazar says the goal was to make art accessible to everyone, bringing world-class creativity directly into daily life. Nearly a decade on, the murals continue to attract visitors from across Turkey, many travelling specifically to see and capture the artworks, boosting both cultural visibility and tourism in the city.
Thank you for watching Daybreak with me, Dilek Tuna. Stay tuned to A News for more updates throughout the day and later in the evening.